Alrighty, so now we are entering mainline Sveshnikov territory in earnest as we begin to engage with the 7 bishop g5 variations of the Sveshnikov. And in this course, we are going to make a very clear cut and split between two main ideas for white, one of them being here knight d5, and the other one is the immediate bishop takes f6. We are going to refer to this one as the tactical and knight d5 as the positional, since these moves indeed do bring rather different characteristics to the game. So let us begin with the positional knight d5. And in this particular chapter, first we are going to look at some of the side variations here. In fact, I'm already going to begin side variations here because I can already play knight a b1 here for white, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the very move recommended by the one and only Anish Giri in his E4 course. So let's have a red hot look at this knight b1. First of all, with all due respect to Anish, because he certainly deserves the respect, but let's have a giggle about the fact that this knight went from g1 to b1 via f3, d4, b5, a3, and b1. That does deserve, come on, that does deserve a little sly smile. But chess is an interesting game because sometimes you do get away with murder, and you do get away with a massive knight dance like that. And in fact, the move is sensible because white is looking to read out the second knight towards d5 as well, thus ensuring that there is always gonna be a piece recapturing on d5, the quintessential white goal. In fact, in the Sveshnikov is to retain control and in fact outpost on d5. So let's see. We break the pin, the most common operation, and we take back with the bishop. Again, don't take back this with the pawn. First of all, once there is a bishop on e7, pawn retake is typically worse because we like to develop the dark squared bishop this way. And also, it's very quick incoming white pieces that makes it just not so great. So bishop takes back, and now we have got knight d5 and a4. Typically, in almost all Sicilians, when knight d5 is ready to go, and there is a black pawn on b5, it's best to start operation with a4, provoking b4 and then knight d5, as it splits the pawns and creates weaknesses also amongst the pawns, like the c4 square, but also the pawns themselves can become better targets. Nonetheless, let's start with, sorry about that, let's start with knight d5 first as a side variation. Now we are going to play rook b8, which immediately cuts a4 out of the equation, a very common Sveshnikov motif. We remove the rook from the a file, we put it on the b file, and anytime a4 comes, we take, and b2 is going to be a target. So knight d2. Note that the reason why the knight is routing to d2 rather than to c3 is because d5 is not challenged at all. And if they had gone to c3 instead, we could have just plonked the knight on d4, and those two would be what Mr. Dvoretsky used to call in his books the superfluous knights, when they are on the same circuit, but there is no trade to be seen, and so they kind of are treading on each other's toes. Bishop g5, challenging the very knight, bishop d3, and knight e7. Now we begin fighting for the d5 square, take, and castles. We castle as well, and we have got a very healthy and problem-free position. It's crystal clear that white has lost the strategic battle for the control of the d5 square. Bishop e6 is coming. We can then play for d5. g6 f5 is a way to play if we really want to go crazy, but just overall very easy equality for black. But we certainly have the trump cards of the bishop pair and the more fluid pawn play still available to us. So on that note, let's go with a4. Everyone plays a4. b4, knight d5, bishop e6, bishop c4, Another benefit of playing a4 for white is that now the bishop can come to c4 to support d5 knight. Castles, castles, and bishop g5. This is another one of those tabias, I think, is the best way I can describe it, where all of these pieces follow a very logical Sveshnikov pattern. You couldn't possibly ask for a better square for any of those pieces. Lying, the most optimal would be if the g5 bishop were here. But that would be almost too nice to be true. Speaking of the devil, by the way, we are going to accomplish that in one of these upcoming lights. Knight d2. The idea is to bring the knight around to f3. Knight e7, challenging d5. And now if knight takes, queen takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and knight f3, guess what we are going to do? You got it right. Bishop d8. And indeed, the bishop is going to come to b6 and then c5. And although technically this is a bad bishop, this is one of those cases where the bad bishop becomes a good bishop, because from c5, it defends both of our weaknesses, and it also exerts pressure onto white's f2 pawn. As the good old adage goes, bad bishops protect good pawns. And yeah, so you can see the stark difference between having the bishop on c5 or on e7. Right, so I'm quite excited to be back here, because once we establish the bishop on c5, we can break with f5 and have some very fun counterplay on the f file. And it's not quite clear how white can drum up any sort of play at all. Better, therefore, is to play knight f3 before capturing e7, which forces the bishop back to h6, and now a5. This move splits the pawns on b4 and a6, thus making them both more vulnerable. So we need to find a target as well, and that target is going to be the c2 pawn after the masses of trades on d5. And again, the h6 bishop is bad, but it's good enough to cover the c1 square. And that's a constant pain for white in the Sveshnikov. Trust me, I have played the Sveshnikov. I have been playing the Sveshnikov actually with the white pieces for 3 decades now. So I have had enough of trouble with, man, if only I could play rook c1 and cover this pawn. Can't do. So instead, white here has to accept the elimination of as many pawns as there is on the board, and arriving in this very, very drawish, symmetrical position. Righto. And so, instead of knight d2, the best move here is indeed queen to d3, bringing the queen up to d3, protecting the bishop on c4, and allowing the knight to come to d2 without disconnecting the queen from the critical d5 square. Oh, and last but not least, also, cheeky attack on the a6 pawn is also added to the menu. a5, therefore, is forced. And now again, 2 moves. If knight d2, this doesn't quite adapt, we can just take it, and now white loses a fat tempo on the queen move, knight d4, and there's no way that we will ever be worse here. If c3, we can just take, and our favorite counterattack mechanism kicks in. Rook c8, just because it's hanging, it doesn't mean that we have to move it. Queen d3, bishop takes d5, cd, ed, excuse me, and queen c7. This is actually counterattack galore, and finally we trade down into a dead draw rook ending. If queen d3, then rook c8, rook c1, and again trade queen d7 guarantees a very healthy position for us. a4 pawn is hanging, and after c3 we can just take and pull the knight back to e6, and if they don't take it, the knight might come to c5, actually not might, it will, or f4, and in either case the a4 pawn is under attack. It looks like white has more to defend than we do. So overall, again, a very good looking healthy position. Therefore, after queen d3, a5, the move is c3. White wants to split up the pawns or break up the pawns on the queen side and ultimately eke out a distant passed pawn. So what white is looking to do is to trade down this, then play b4, somehow trade this for the b pawn, and then send the a pawn. What we have in store and in stock for black as black against this is active piece play and some dirty tactics. We maintain the tension for starters, and we add some extra juice on the c file to the position. Let me show you what exactly we are cooking here after bishop h6. It's a very fun, very entertaining line. We go take c3, exchange Saccharino, bishop takes, we take b2. That has to be met by rook a3. Rook a2 is horrible on account of bishop takes, and no matter what takes back knight b4 is going to fork the royal family. So rook a3 has to be played. And now we just retake on c8. And we can already see the outline of a marvelous compensation with a knight coming to d4, a break coming on f5. Sveshnikov dreams are made out of positions like this. Superb counterplay for the sacrificed exchange, chef's kiss position. Alternatively, after rook c8, white has rook d1. Now we take c3, and now they should take back with the knight. Pawn takes looks ugly, and it's exactly the opposite of what white wants to do. In this case, we simply challenge the d5 square, and with the c3 pawn being isolated, white has no business whatsoever to hope for any sort of advantage. Shame on them. Now, take back with the pawn is mandatory. Knight b4, hitting queen, hitting knight, and note that the knight can't take back because of bishop c4. Shout out to the move rook c8. Queen e2, g6. Typical Sveshnikov operation. We want to slide the king to h8 and then play f5. The move also occasionally allows us to regroup the bishop, sometimes to step the king up. Just an overall useful prophylactic move, as is b3. And now after knight d, and pawn to h5, which is the very important aspect of g6 I forgot to mention, we have got a position that I would describe as dynamic equilibrium. Occasionally we can jump out here. Sometimes we can push the pawn all the way down here. The rook can pop on c5, putting some pressure on d5. It's very difficult to make progress for either color, and draw is a likely outcome, but the position is still full of life and full of potential for both sides, really. And with that, friends, we are now going to move on to the bishop e7 lines, and here everything that is not c3 or c4, which are the two big lines that we are going to discuss in the next two chapters. So let's now continue our investigation with bishop e7. Alrighty, so now we are going to have a look at our very first, very Sveshnikov-y variation within bishop g5, which is going to be the anti-positional, speaking of the positional knight d5, the anti-positional knight e7, and I'm calling it anti-positional because the whole idea of the bishop g5 line is technically to try to claim the d5 square for the knight, and so giving up said knight for the worst bishop on the board seems strategically unjustified. Now, of course, taking on f6 is just masses of trades, after which white is left with an undeveloped bishop and a terrible knight on the edge of the board. We have nothing to fear. Hence, we are looking at knight takes e7. Obviously, the main line is going to be bishop takes f6, which we shall examine in the further chapters coming after these. So knight e7, we take back with the knight. Note that queen e7 is playable here too, but I already told you that we are great aficionados of all kinds of double pawns in the Sveshnikov, and so sure enough, we invite bishop takes f6 with all our might. If they do not accept the invitation and play bishop d3, we immediately strike at the center, which is where good chess is played, when chess is played well. If e d, then queen d5, and we are golden. Bishop b7 is going to come, and our pressure on the long diagonal is going to be a very serious problem for white. Whereas if bishop f6, pawn takes f6, and c3, ed, queen d, queen the f3, and queen c5 is already a great position for us. We have got a fair few dirty tricks up our sleeve. Queen b4 check is pending. The e3 square is weak. Occasionally a knight can pop up there. It's not fun for white at all. Yes, so going back, c3 I think is a wise way to play immediately, opening up the c2 square for the knight. Bishop b7, queen e2, that move hints at a potential queenside castles. And here comes another motive that I absolutely love from the Sveshnikov. So what you want to do in such scenarios is not only to trade into e4, but then be able to continuously roll forward with your pawns. And you can't do that if you take, because, well, first and foremost, we lost a very important central pawn. But more importantly, now f5 is not playable on account of the e5 pawn hanging. And so the rest of the structure has become a little bit rigid. And the best way to address this problem is that you set the board on fire with f5, creating this mega tension in the center where seemingly everything is hanging, but somehow now our central pawns much better collaborate, and no matter which way white captures, we can continue. This is what I meant, that the pawns just keep on relentlessly rolling on. And after bishop c2, knight takes f5, we have got a very attractive looking position where the funny thing is that seemingly we have neither side available for castling and white has both. But the reality is that actually neither side is safe for white either, king in particular, because then rook g8, queen g5, knight h4, our bishop is pointing that way. That is not a safe haven. And likewise, if you go and castle queenside, a very quick rook c8, queen b6, b4 push can blast that position open in front of the white king. And so the peculiar situation of the kings is an important factor here for sure. And last but not least, by the way, castling kingside followed by tucking the king away on h8 is perfectly safe for black. So bishop d3, no worries. So now we are on to bishop takes f6, pawn takes f6, and we have got again the desired pawn structure where we are so excited to keep those pawns pushed. Okay, so I'm getting excited and I'm pressing wrong buttons. At this point, white has two main ideas, bishop d3 and pawn to c4. Let's begin with bishop d3. This invites rook g8 as g2 is now hanging. g3 is, I think, the best way to deal with this. Castling into the g5 looks very dangerous on account of f5, followed by the bishop popping on b7 and increasing the tension and the attacking potential against the white king. So g3 for sure, and d5. ed, queen d, and now this is a very fat tempo on the h1 rook. And after f3 comes again the previously seen move, queen c5, again threatening the check, threatening the knight invasion. And we are looking really great here. And if white gets greedy, which is always warmly welcome on our end, then I get to demonstrate a really neat finish for you, friends. Check this out. b4, bishop g8 is the main line. If knight b1, bishop f5. Bishop takes, knight takes, and the knight is coming in on e3. The invasion is going to be absolutely brutal. Whereas if they take g8, then we are going to take a3. The bishop steps back to h7. We take b2. And after bishop f5, trade, we are completely winning here with black. And the reason for that is that the rook on b1 is doomed to passivity. And the white is helpless against the invasion of the black pieces. A very impressive variation. Note that rook b2 loses the rook to queen c3 check. Any other case, rook d8, queen check one or the other, the knight penetration, the rook penetration. It is absolutely untenable. White is dead lost. And this is, once again, the very essence of why the Sveshnikov is so much fun to play with the black pieces. Okay, so bishop d3, forget about it. c4 is where it's at. And now we are going to learn, and I will introduce, and we will learn together a new Sveshnikov concept here, because this is the first time I believe that we see the c4 idea. So very often the most adequate response to c4 is to ignore it. Don't engage, don't take, don't defend. Let it go. We are going full frozen style here. Let it go. And instead, what we do is we pile up on the central pawn on e4. We tend to often sack these two for this one, and then send it in classic Sveshnikov style. Let me demonstrate. Bishop b7. Bishop d3 is the main line here, by the way, which says a lot. cb, bishop takes, ba. If queen a4, which is seemingly a very nasty double attack with e4 hanging and ba hanging with check, no worries, d5. ba, king f8. And we have got tremendous compensation. And again, it's us who already has moved the king, and very clearly it is white who has got king problems. Queenside castles being extremely open and deadly, kingside castles being quite far away and also very dangerous on account of the g file. So yeah, it's not an easy business at all. And our plan is simply to play d5, d4, excuse me, knight d5, and then potentially jump the knight to f4 and have an absolute field day here. Let me show you. d4, f3, just go back. It's a very cheeky move. Yeah. We are even styling on our opponent here a little bit. Knight c2, rook g8. If the queen moves off of the a file, then we of course will take the pawn. And I'm loving life. I'm loving black. We can play f5. We can push d3. Queen b6 is a move. We can regain the pawn on a6. We can easily tuck the king away here. Don't know what to tell you. It is the best vibes in the Sveshnikov. So if not queen a4, but ba, then castles. Perfectly safe then. Bishop e2. Now don't take g2. That would cost us a piece. Instead, knight g6, shielding the g file. Now bishop takes g2 is a genuine threat. And after castles, knight f4, we are already very, very happy campers. Note that f3 almost loses outright to check, take, and all kinds of issues there popping. So bishop f3 is forced. And as usual, we go like, no worries. Time to send it. f5, d5. We are going to take this pawn with the rook, send the rook across to the king side, and checkmate as usual in the Sveshnikov. Boy, am I having fun. Yeah. Okay, finally, the last variation is bishop d3. White practices some caution and not engaging immediately with the b5 pawn, but first securing the e4 one. Very logical. And once again, as per scripted, we keep on ignoring the pressure here, and we turn up the heat over there. That is how the Sveshnikov is played when it's done well. Three big variations here to reckon with. EF is met by rook g8. We don't need to take on g2 right away with the bishop, because that would allow white to play rook g1 and be active on the g file. And now again, three branches. cb is well met by check. Rook g2 is also playable, by the way, but this is messy. This is messy. It is a valid alternative, but I think it simplifies the position to a very dry one. So instead, I think we should stick with the check. Trade queens, surprisingly, and then take g2. And I am absolutely in love with this endgame scenario, because despite appearances, or actually the appearances are on our side, despite the numeric considerations, white being a pawn up, and the double passes, both of these things seem very dangerous. The reality, however, is that the white army is incredibly disjointed. Neither of those pawns can move. The knight can't move because a2 is hanging, f5 is hanging, and we have got an absolutely deadly discovered attack to be used on the long diagonal. Long story short, we have a clear advantage. Very impressive stuff. Okay, so if in this position, not cb, but rook g1, trying to guard the pawn on g2, then now we go e4, separating the bishop from the f5 pawn. Bishop goes back, and d5. Again, notice how the pawns tend to follow this pattern of always moving up together. Very, very nice stuff. It's teamwork in the Sveshnikov, really. cb, knight takes f5, queen d2, trying to castle queenside on the occasion. d4, pawns are going, castles, d3. And white is in a world of hurt. Knight d4 is incoming, and yeah, we are having all the play here, and not so surprisingly, the engines also think that black is better here. Yay! Last but not least, in this position, we can also play queen d2, as in black can, white can even, excuse me, leaving g2 on prey, but planning to castle as soon as possible. We do take g2, and we go rook c8. A very nasty pin. White is best advised to immediately dodge it, and then we go queen b6. I would like you to note how we have played 3 heavy piece moves back to back, and all 3 of them were very punchy. Rook g2, splitting the pawns, hitting f2. Rook c8, jumping onto the same file with the queen. Queen b6, king, jumping onto the same file with the king again, plus hitting f2 again. Very powerful play by black. Loving it. Ooh. Sorry, one more time. Queen b6, rook f1, e4. No surprises. Bishop c2, e3. Sveshnikov and pawns, that means go, go, go. That is as simple as that. Loving it. Obviously, the pawn can't take because of the pin on the second, so the queen has to take. And again, the queen trade, friends. Gotcha, said the b4 pawn to the knight. And now bishop a4 is forced, king f8, knight c2. But this is not quite good enough yet, as now white is utterly tangled up and pinned every which way. And again, if you compare our pieces like for like, you will find that our bishop is better than theirs, our knight is better than theirs, our two rooks are better than theirs, and consequently, our position is better than theirs. Right, and that brings us back to the final main line, which is pawn f3, white further bolstering the e4 pawn, not giving us an inch. Very sensible play, but of course we don't give up. Instead, we try to mount even greater pressure. Rook g8, queen d2. It's a very handy move because it also dodges the check, by the way, on the diagonal. And now comes the first time when we see this. I think the greatest benefit of the double f pawns is that we just played f5. Now we take and we play f5 again. You can never ever do that unless you have double pawns. Castles only. Queen c7. Note that this time round, this also prepares queenside castling for us. ef, rook g2, queen h6, and oh yes, this line is absolute bananas. So here we need to remember a few very important tactical details. bc, hitting the bishop and trying to threaten the king with c3 at times. Now, bishop c4 is the inferior move, which allows a castling for us. And now I'm going to show you here some crazy, wild complications. which end up in this absolute wildly messy position. But note that black is definitely calling the shots here. Unless I'm mistaken, I didn't even realize this. I think we are threatening here queen c4. Knight c4, rook check, king b1, and then rook takes here. Yeah, queen d3 can be played, but this is a threat. Obviously, the main threat is d5, but that goes to show how the Sveshnikov mind works. I really want to hear that, king man and ladies. So yeah, feel free to consider such ideas as sacking the queen there. Black is definitely way ahead. So the better move here is to sneak in the check, the intermezzo check, and then now we can play bishop c4 or better bishop c2 per main line. Bishop c4 is well met by queen b6, tiny little mate threat on b2, knight c2 forced, bishop e4, another mate threat, rook d2 forced, trade, and after queen takes b2, it is perfect time for white to regret that they allowed the Sveshnikov against us. That's not a good call. So let's go bishop c2, c3, again trying to rip the king open, queen h6, and now white is using the b-pawn as an umbrella pawn, and although that caused them a pawn and a degree of discomfort, now it's our turn to feel the pressure because d6 is hanging with check. So we need to be careful here. Rook takes c2 is best. Knight takes, bishop takes. And here is the very, very important final detail. When they take on d6, you've got to go back to e8. Reason being that after king c8, queen e6 check, king b8, rook d7, we are unfortunately defeated. So go to e8. It looks scarier, but it's safer. And after queen h5 check comes the absolute shocker, knight g6. It is an absolutely crazy line, but then again, this is the Sveshnikov, ladies and gentlemen, so crazy is expected. Every single piece is on hanging. Takes, check, king up, queen, takes, bishop e4, and we are calling it a day here. Normally we would be winning, but unfortunately, if white finds all the correct checks, then this is going to fizzle out into a perpetual check, at least according to the engine. But I wish the very best of luck to our opponents to find these 30 moves for white plus the required remaining 10 to stay in this game. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes the early deviations / sidelines in the positional knight d5. And now we are going to look into the first big batch of the main lines of the positional knight d5, which will be the pawn c3 variation. So that's up next.